how to present. Okay? And in session 1, I talked about what I would consider to be really basic ideas. You know, like what size font do you use? Or what colors do you use? How many slides do you need for each minute of your presentation? That kind of very simple stuff. And I hope that by now you're really starting to get an idea for that, and your presentation is, the basics of your presentation are already shaped. Okay, I hope. In the second session, we talked about what I think is one of the most important ideas for you when you make a presentation or write an essay. And that's about how you structure your essay or your presentation so that it's easy for people to understand. Okay? Of course, it's very difficult for me to help you with the content of your essay or your presentation. That's really up to you. The research you do, the ideas you have, that will be your contribution. But I hope that if you follow my system for starting with the big picture, for what we call a big chunk, and you move down at a slow pace so that you bring people with you, and then give them the details of your presentation, and then move back up to the conclusion, linking the details to the big picture. I hope that you're getting the hang of this, and I think this is a very important skill. I think it's important for more than just your presentation. One of the main things that happens when you go to postgraduate is that you have all of these ideas of wonderful research you would like to do. My research is in teaching English language. Okay? So of course I think, what would I like to know? I would like to know what makes the difference between a good English language learner and a bad English language learner. That's such a good question. I think, okay, I want to do research and find out what makes the difference between people who are good at learning English and people who are bad at learning English. The problem is that this is a very big chunk. And when you go to do research on such a big picture, you will find out it's basically impossible. You have to break it down, because there are so many answers to that question. What makes the difference? Well, motivation. Motivation is very important for deciding who will be good at learning English and who will not. Environment. Environment is very important. Babies who live in English countries always learn English, whether they are motivated or not. Okay? Each of those is a smaller chunk. And within each of those, there are smaller chunks. So when you go to postgraduate and you have this huge idea for what you want to research, your professor will say to you, no, that's not possible. And you will spend several months getting down to a small chunk. And then for 1 year or 2 years, you will work on the details. And then you have to write a paper. And so for 1 year, you've been thinking just of the details. And so you write a paper about the details. And nobody reads it, because nobody is interested in this topic, this little wee piece of information you have. So when you write your paper, you have to go back to the big picture. What was important? Why did you become interested in this? And then if you start your paper, start your presentation with those ideas which people are really interested in, then they will listen to you through the details. So now what you're doing is you're making sure that you have a big picture, that you come down and you have the details, and that you relate the details back to the big picture to give your conclusion. That will interest people in your presentation. Now, in the third session, we talked about using metaphor, because your presentation is only 5 minutes. The reality is this is too short. That's often the reality with a presentation. If you go to a big conference, you might get 20 minutes. It's not enough. So you have to think, how can you get your key ideas across in such a short time? And one way to do that is to, think of metaphors. Think of ways that you can teach less because you can use what people already know. Okay? If I find someone who knows how to ride a bicycle, it's much easier to teach them how to drive a car. In fact, that's one of the reasons that the police in New Zealand want primary school students to ride bikes to school. In Japan, people say children should not ride the bicycle to school because it's dangerous. But in New Zealand we say, yes, it's dangerous, but children who ride a bicycle are good drivers. People who don't ride a bicycle are bad drivers. Okay? Because the skills build on each other. They are similar. If somebody knows how to drive a car, it's very simple to learn how to drive a truck. But if you don't know how to drive a car, learning to drive a truck is very difficult. That's basic, simple. I'm sure you can understand. Of course, yes, well, of course. Well, what you have to think is, how is your presentation topic similar to something people already know? And that's what a metaphor is. It's saying A is similar to B, plus or minus C. Okay? And if you don't use a metaphor, if you don't use people's prior knowledge, the things they already know, you have to describe everything. But if you use a metaphor, all you have to describe is C, the plus or minus C part. A equals B plus or minus C. If you try to describe all of A, that will take a long time. But if people already know B, all you have to describe, to teach, is C. Okay? A equals B plus or minus C. That's using a metaphor to describe things. Finally today, just for a little bit of fun, to warm you up before you do your presentations, I want to warn you about some of the problems that there are with metaphors and with the way that people always think. Okay, so these are little problem-solving questions. Okay? And hopefully they will teach you a little bit about the fact that when people think, they often cause their own problems. So here is problem number one. Problem number one is that there is a farmer. Okay? And the farmer lives on a farm. Okay? Now, the farmer has to go to the village sometimes to sell the things that he makes on the farm. Okay? Now, this particular farmer is a chicken farmer. He farms chickens. Now, what he does is he grows corn. He grows lots and lots of corn, and then he uses the corn, takes the yellow bit that you can eat, dries it, and feeds it to his chickens. And his chickens become big and fat, and he takes the chickens to the village, and he sells them and people eat them. Okay? Some years, the farmer has extra corn. He has more corn than he can use to feed his chickens. In this case, the farmer also sells some corn at the village. So one day, the farmer decides to go to the village and sell some chickens. And also he has some extra corn. So he gets a very big bag of corn, maybe about 70 kilograms. Big bag of corn. And he takes out about, 10 chickens. And he takes the chickens and he can't carry, this is 100 years ago, maybe. He doesn't have a car. He doesn't even have a horse. So he can't carry the corn and the chickens. So he puts the corn in a big bag, and he can carry that on his shoulders, 70 kilograms. And he takes the 10 chickens and he ties them together around their necks. And then he ties a string so he can hold it and carry the corn and walk to the village. Now, in the area where the farmer lives, there are also some dangerous animals like bears, mountain lions. So wherever the farmer goes, he always brings his dog. And it's not like a small Japanese dog, like a Chihuahua or something like that. It's a big dog, right? Okay, so the farmer leaves for the village, and he has his dog, and he has some corn in a bag, and he has some chickens. Now, he comes to a river between him and the village. And usually, he can walk across the river, and the chickens can walk across the river, and the dog can walk across the river, and there is no problem, because the river is very low. But on this day, it has been raining, and the water level in the river has come up, and it's, like the height of the desk. So he looks at the river and he realizes his dog will be swept away. Of course, his chickens will be swept away, and the corn can't walk across the river. So he thinks, well, I guess I can carry them across the river on my shoulders because it's only up to here. But he has a problem. You see, the dog is a big, strong dog, and if he leaves the dog and the chickens together, the dog will eat the chickens. Okay. Now also, the chickens, being chickens, they like to eat corn. So if he leaves the corn and the chickens together, the chickens will eat the corn. But the farmer thinks, no problem. I'm very smart. I have the solution. What I will do is I will carry the chickens across, and I will leave the dog and the corn. The dog won't eat the corn. So I will carry the chickens across, and then I will come back, and I will get the dog, and I will carry the dog across, and then I will come back and get the corn, but the dog will eat my chickens. Oh dear. I know. I will carry the... what can I do? There is no solution. I can only carry one thing at a time, and I can't leave the dog and the chickens together, and I can't leave the corn and the chickens. I will have to go back to my farm. I will give up. Is the farmer right? Should he give up? Is there another solution? What can the farmer do?
He can let the chicken eat the corn, and chickens become more larger. And first he carry his dog, and after that he catch chicken, and then he can sell at the bears more larger chicken in
in the village.
in the village.
Well, that might work, but the farmer seems to think that he will get more money if he sells chicken and corn. That's why he has bought both. So that's a good idea. It's thinking outside the box, thinking of a different solution. But in this case, the farmer thinks, well, really I want to sell both the chickens and the corn. Do we have any other solution?
First, actually bring chickens to the over river.
Okay, over the river.
Go back. Then next bring corn.
Bring the corn across the river.
When he go back, he brings back chicken.
Brings back the chickens to the dog, yes?
Third, he brings dog. Brings dog.
Brings the dog across, leaving the chickens, yes?
Then come back and lastly bring chicken again.
Okay. Oh, this seems to work. So he takes the chickens across, comes back, gets the corn across, takes the chickens back, takes the dog across, comes back, gets the chickens, they're on the other side, all gone. Okay. So this is a very simple solution, and it's a perfect solution. And for this, to think of this solution, you have to understand that he can carry things back across the river. Now, usually, we don't think about that. We think he is going from here to here, and it's one direction. But it doesn't have to be one direction. He can come back and forth. We create our own box, which is making it difficult for us to find a solution. Okay? We have in our minds an image which doesn't help us. Let's think of another problem. In Japan, usually a house is right next to the road. So a Japanese house might look kind of like this. It has a house and then you have a road here, right? But a New Zealand house is a bit different. A New Zealand house usually has a large section like this. And the house is back here, and you might have a garage for your car here, and then there is a driveway between the garage and the road. Okay? So one day, there is a young boy, and he is playing on his bicycle. Right? Now, his father backs the car out of the garage, and he doesn't see the small child on the bicycle, and he hits the small child with his car. Boom! And he gets out of his car, and his child is unconscious. And he picks up the child, puts the child in the car, speeds to the hospital. They rush the child into surgery. And the doctor comes in, looks at the child, and the doctor says, "Oh, this is my son. I can't operate on him." Who is the doctor? Who is the doctor? So, the father is here, backs his car out, he hits the son, he rushes the son to the hospital, the son is taken into the operation room, the doctor comes in, looks at the son, and says, "Oh, I can't operate on this boy, he is my son." Who is the doctor? You have an answer?
I know the answer.
Huh?
I know the answer.
You know you've heard this before? Okay, I'll let you wait then, for someone who hasn't heard. Okay, someone who hasn't heard, do you know the answer? Yes?
His mother?
Yes, of course. His mother. Why didn't everyone have their hand up? It's obvious. Children only have two parents, father and mother. The father hit him with the car, so the doctor must be his mother. It's not a problem at all. Everyone should know the answer, right? But yet, it takes people a very long time to think of the answer. If we look at the average, it takes people a very long time to tell you it's his mother. Sometimes they will think of other ideas. His stepfather, his father-in-law, he was adopted when he was a baby. Because you have a very strong image that a doctor is a man. Doctor equals man. Now, interestingly, there is some research on this question, and they find that women are much quicker to find the answer than men. So this tells you that men have a stronger image that a doctor is a man. Okay, I'll do one final one more. This is what we call a yes-no problem. You can ask me questions, and I can answer either yes or no. And you have to find out what happened and why. What happened and why. So here is the problem. Juliet is lying dead in a puddle of water. Juliet is lying dead in a puddle of water. And Romeo is jumping out the window. Juliet is lying dead in a puddle of water. And Romeo is jumping out the window. What happened? Yes, sir.
Are they in a ship?
In a ship? No, they are not. You can ask questions, yes or no questions. I will answer yes or no. To give you a little bit of help, I'm going to explain one more problem like this and tell you the answer. Okay? It's a problem that I can't use with Japanese people very well because it relies on people knowing two meanings for an English word. Okay? So in English there is a word cabin. Cabin. Now, in English, this word has two meanings. One is a cabin, like on a mountain. A cabin is like yamagoya, a small house. So a cabin on a mountain, we call this a cabin. Now, another meaning for cabin is like in an aeroplane. The inside of an aeroplane is called a cabin. Okay? Now, the story goes like this. 137 people are dead in a cabin on the side of a mountain. What happened? Now, as soon as I say a cabin on the side of a mountain, English speakers get an image like this. And so they will ask questions like, was it a fire? Did they die in a fire? And I will say, well, yes, there was a fire, but no, they didn't die because of the fire. And then they will say, oh, did they kill each other? Did they go crazy and kill each other? No. No, they did not kill each other. Was it cold? Did they freeze to death? Yes, it was cold, but no, they didn't freeze to death. And people keep asking questions. Okay? But of course the answer is that an aeroplane crashed into the mountain and they died in the accident. But as soon as I say cabin and mountain, people have this image. And they make a box. And they only look inside the box for the answer. They don't look outside. Okay, so let's go back to Romeo and Juliet. Juliet is lying dead in a puddle of water. And Romeo is jumping out the window. What happened? So my hint is, think outside the box. Something about your image is not correct.
Was Juliet killed by Romeo?
Yes. Juliet was killed by Romeo. More questions? Okay, for now we will go on to your presentations and you can keep thinking about this, and at the end of the class you can ask me if you have some more ideas. But the point that I'm trying to make is that the way you talk to people is important. Okay? When you say cabin and mountain together, people get this image. So when you use metaphor, you can use a metaphor to make it very easy for people to understand what you are saying. You can control the images they get. On the other hand, you have to be very careful, because if your metaphor is wrong, if your way of describing things is wrong, people get a misunderstanding. For example, last week we talked about the metaphor of the city, the cell city. And we said a cell is like a city. It has a power plant, a mitochondria, which is like where you generate electricity. And it has a planning part, like a city council, which controls how the cell grows and changes. And this is kind of like the brain. This is like the city council. This is the nucleus. Well, this is the way that I have taught cells. It's the way I was taught cells 20 or 30 years ago, and it's probably wrong. Okay? Probably the metaphor is not correct. It seems that in some ways the cell membrane, the wall around the cell, is in a way like the brain. It controls the cell by deciding what comes in and what does not. So because of this metaphor, people have not thought about that for a very long time. And now they're only just starting to think, oh, actually, maybe our idea about the cell was wrong. So the way you talk can make it easier or harder for people to understand your idea. Okay? So this is just a bit of a fun warm-up to think about that. Okay, today we will break into two groups. We will take 3 people that way and 4 people that way, and I will put a wall in the middle using these screens so that you don't interrupt each other. I want you to try and present as if it was the real presentation. that means you take exactly 5 minutes, and if you go over, we will stop you. Okay? And you will have 5 minutes for questions. Okay? So this is what we call a dress rehearsal, the real thing, the real rehearsal. Okay? Okay, so you can play rock, scissors, paper, or punch each other, or whatever you like. I don't know how you're going to decide who goes first. What is the best way? Rock, scissors, paper is popular. Fight. First in, first served. Hayamongachi. Hai, tsunai da kara watashi desu. Okay, what would you like? Okay.